This is the Inclusion Conversation. I'm your host, Grace Young Foster, founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative. I'm an adoptee, I'm a foster care alum, and I'm passionate about elevating our communities. It's time we're included and visible in the conversations about work, careers, and just life. Let's be visible and let's be loud. Join me now. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Inclusion Conversation. I'm Grace Young Foster. I'm the founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative, and I'm your host today. And I'm so excited to be welcoming our friend Shelise in this episode as our guest. And before I do that, though, wanted to remind you all that we really appreciate your support of the show. So please like, follow, share our show on all of the streaming platforms. So without further ado, wanted to introduce our guest, Shelise. Shelise is a transnational South Korean interracial adopted person who was adopted as an infant through an adoption agency and raised by a white family on a farm in southern Minnesota. There were 3 siblings who are the biological children to her adoptive parents, and she has been involved in the adoption community for over a decade as an administrator, an educator, and an advocate. Shelise, welcome. Really great to see you.
Hi, Grace. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be a guest on your show.
Well, Shelise and we met really through the community of the adoptee ecosystem and the foster alum ecosystem, and specifically through the organization of Adoption Mosaic, which Shelise has been employed and involved with for many, many years. So Shelise, I would love to have you introduce yourself to our audience by sharing what it is you want us to know about your story.
Well, I think kind of elaborating on my bio is just that I was adopted as an infant. I came to the States on a plane to MSP, the airport of Minneapolis, and my parents and my 2 older siblings picked me up. And I think my mom's mom was there as well. And yeah, I grew up, I was adopted I came to the States in 1980. And I was really just raised in this philosophy of love is enough. Just raise them like they were born to you, and and it'll be fine. And I think, especially with my past work experience at Adoption Mosaic and having the privilege of hearing many adoptee stories, I think, knowing that so many perspectives and narratives of the adoption experience, it really, my parents were doing that. They already had 2 kids that they had biologically that they were raising, and they essentially just threw me in the mix. And I mean, I can honestly say there wasn't any distinct time where I felt like I didn't belong there. I mean, I think definitely times I felt that way, but I don't think that was initiated by my family. My siblings, I have an older brother, an older sister, and a younger brother who are my parents' biological children. And we never had the kind of conflict about, oh, you're adopted, oh, you don't belong here, or we're not really family. I just grew up in a small, close-knit community where enmeshed, highly connected relationships were normal. And because of that, I think closeness, everybody knew where I came from. And so that didn't come up into question very often when I was with my immediate family or my extended family or even my community. Like, everybody just knows basic facts about most people when you're living in a small town. And so it wasn't an issue until really until my own world began to grow and I was meeting people I didn't know or going, to college and really having to grapple with questions of my identity outside of my family. I mean, I think being raised in that environment definitely had its positives, especially when you're a person, an adopted person who's kind of running in survival mode and really wanting, striving, doing your best to feel like you fit in or belong. And yet, there was just many conversations and knowledge and guidance that was lacking. And, it really led to I think, a deeper challenge of identity and place as I got older.
Yeah. And, like it's so relatable for many of us who are transracial adoptees, right? When we're put into families that don't reflect what we look like on the outside. And then there's all that ambiguity of like, what is my culture? Like, I obviously look different, but what is this like place of, I'm from Korea, you're from Korea. Like, what is this place of Korea? Like, what does that even mean? Right? We have no like frame of reference for even like the country that we were born in. And then we're put into this environment where there's no sense of self. It's like you're part of the family, you're a part of that community, right? So often the adoption narratives are like that. Like you complete X or you are a part of X, but never like you are an individual person that is unique and celebrated, and you are, to be recognized as a separate entity from your parents, right? As adoptees and as fosters, that often happens where we're never an individual. And so it's so relatable what you shared, that even though it's not really talked about ever, you're never intentionally, right, made to feel excluded, not belonging, not a part of. You just inherently feel it though. It's inescapable. And for transracial adoptees, it's because like we literally look different. There's no escaping.
Yes.
And so
yes.
it's clear, right, that we're a piece of the puzzle that doesn't quite fit. And yeah, so I really appreciate you just sharing that overarching experience that you had. And I would love to dive in a little bit more into the experience of all of this, how it culminated, right, as you started entering like the higher education space, when you left your home and left your community, left everyone that like knew you, knew your story, all the unspoken pieces of you were kind of like just like a known thing, right? No one questioned it. Then you step into this collegiate space where it's like, oh, you're Asian, but not really Asian, and things like that. So tell us a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, I think in reflection, especially as a young adult, looking back, I could see I was very ill-equipped to handle the challenges of being an Asian person, and specifically, a cisgender Asian female person out in the world. And it was a bit of hard learning and really some disillusionment about, I think, growing up adjacent to whiteness. You do buy into this idea of like you can be recognized or achieve based on your own merit, and then you're kind of thrown into this environment where it's actually people are just making assumptions about you based on the way that you look, and you have no tools. Growing up adjacent to whiteness, in whiteness, around white people, you have no tools to recognize that or unpack that. And I think it really, having those lack of faculties like really impacts your how you view yourself, because in this way you just discover that you're kind of incapable of being the person that you are outside of your family. And it's just like, it's so layered and full of complexities. And it just like, it's a bit of, I mean, I felt like it was a bit of learning, like the school of hard knocks, just realizing like, oh, there's such a thing as yellow fever. Oh, as an Asian female, people think of me a certain way, or, I am an Asian who's bad at math. That's not the way my brain works. And really like having people be shocked that was a thing. And then also having to decide, like, how do I want to present myself? I think, growing up in my white family, in a majority white community, I would say almost exclusively white community, it was always about what I value, my likes and dislikes, the kind of cultural competence I had of my community, that I was always pushing forward to make sure I was like, hey, I know I look different, but I'm just like you if you give me a chance, and then I think once you're outside of that, you have to decide, you have to walk around with this understanding that you're being perceived a certain way. And how do you, one, discern those people who are only seeing you at face value and handle them? And two, what is it about yourself that you do want to be putting forward now that you're, being viewed in this lens, and what's important to you about that? Also realizing that I'm actually a part of a larger, BIPOC community of people who have not lived in whiteness, maybe surrounded by whiteness, but not in with the same intimacy as I have. And really and people have opinions about that. And what does that mean for me, being intimately connected to people that I love, who are also people who participate in systems that have harmed me, and that harm me, especially as an individual outside of my family. And so I think, it's a long time. I think, young people who are adopted or have experienced relinquishment really do go through these multiple identity systems where you're kind of identifying yourself as a person of color. You're entering, however you like to describe it, coming out of the fog, entering into adoptee consciousness, going through all those touchstones, deciding who you are in relation to your family now that you're a person independent of them. And, and really just trying to get, pay rent and have a job and go to school and all those other survival things. And I think, for young people, it's a lot to handle. And then with you, especially when you're coming to all of those without any prior knowledge, I guess now I'm saying this, I'm like, I have to kind of give myself a pat on the back. Like I made it through that part of my life. And because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there's a lot. And yeah, you're absolutely right that we don't walk away from the homes we grew up in with the tools and resources that we needed, especially back then. I think there's a dialogue shift, there's a understanding shift within the adoptee ecosystem, but it's still not enough, right? There needs to be more dedicated conversations, a series, right, of support structures for adoptees and for fosters alike to be able to navigate our independence and our, new experiences as adult adoptees and adult fosters. And just like parents would prepare their kids for any other life event, right? Well, adoptees and fosters, we have this additional, right, range of experience that we also need help in being prepared to navigate independently and to be able to critically think about it and think for ourselves about it, right? And not just follow the narratives that have always just been just because. And so, yeah, I really love that you bring that up. I love how, you reflect on all of that. I also would just like to hear like a little bit about, once you made that initial transition into the school, academic, higher ed, independent life, And then you started discovering these things, right? How people perceive an Asian person that's like they saw you as an Asian person, not as the adoptee who was like thinking of themselves internally as a white person and kind of like ignoring the Asian person that they were, right? Now it's like front and center. You are Asian, so we're going to treat you like an Asian person. We're going to think about you as an Asian person. We're going to have those biases about you as an Asian person, good or bad. And then you are learning these things, you're learning how to navigate through them. And then, right, you sit in it in one environment for a while, and then you transition into the workforce. Tell us a little bit about what that transition was like and maybe some new things that came up because of it.
In college and entering the workplace, I think part of it, especially for your personal narrative, is understanding what your boundaries are about how much you share about your story.
Yeah.
However, I mean, coming up, when I came up, there was no such thing as boundaries about your story. Like, people expected you to tell them everything about you and answer any question. And I think, luckily, I think that now that has changed and there is more guidance and a more structure about who has the right to tell whose story. And, but I think that was really hard, right? Because imposter syndrome gave me a lot of anxiety and like this feeling of being outed as not authentic or, as another diaspora within a diaspora, is the anxiety is really high about that. And yet, and especially when paired with having low boundaries about your story and how you share it, I think that can be really harmful. And I know I can recall several instances where I answered questions I didn't really want to answer, or
Yeah.
shared details about my life I really didn't have to, and probably didn't want to, but I just didn't know how to protect my story, because I
Or that
didn't
you had
grow.
permission to.
Yeah, or that I had permission to, exactly. And I think,
Yeah.
I think that is one thing that, the system that's supposed to be guiding and teaching parents, adoptive or foster parents, about this experience is they actually, they weren't teaching my parents how to equip me with the tools I really needed, to protect myself and, and be autonomous about my story and what it was. But I think
Yeah.
you kind of develop this system of, I mean, I grew up as a compliant, people pleasing adopted person. So, hypervigilance and reading the room wasn't hard for me. And, I was just doing it without even knowing that I was doing it, but really getting a sense for, oh, who needs to know what about me. And I think too, like, just deciding kind of when to out yourself as a non-typical Asian, or, an outlier of whatever you think Asians are. And, when that would help you and when that might hurt you. And, in college, I was just telling somebody this story about a friend of mine. He was Filipino, and we were talking, and I said something about my parents. And then he's like, I think I said they were farmers. And he's like, they're what? And I'm like, yeah, they're farmers in Minnesota. And I was like, oh, yeah, I'm adopted and they're white. And then he was like, oh, he was so shocked because, he had been assuming the whole time that my family is, Asian, that looks like me. And it's, as a person who just always thinks of themselves as different than their family, it was really a funny to realize that people who saw me would assume that my family looked like me. In the workplace, it's really can be really challenging because, what we're bringing to the table personally. I think sometimes we have to be really careful, or we feel like we need to be careful. We're trying to protect ourselves, and that can reflect back as being cold or aloof or, not friendly.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's just especially when you're a young person entering the workforce for the first time, there's just so much other, relinquished trauma that's being stirred up about acceptance and rejection, sensitivity, and all of that. And I think, what is hard about these milestones is that I think when we were growing up in our family, at least I will say this for my personal experience, nobody was telling me all those feelings get stirred up again and again and again as you go through these milestones of life, and like, so maybe some suggestions about how I could manage that, or just some heads up of like, hey, this is going to be a challenge. I think that would have been really helpful.
I agree. Yeah. And you bring up, right, within the workplace, there's just like everyday things that can really be like a trigger or just like a reminder too, right, of the trauma that we experience, for fosters of the family that we don't have, like things like that. It's just like repetitive day after day after day, but we are not like, we don't voice it. So we sit alone in it, and it's hard, right, to have to endure that all the time by yourself. And what ends up happening is, maybe because, to your point, we seem aloof or distant, right? That really can impact our ability to get promoted or be put on like really awesome projects, because people feel like they can't connect with us, which translates to, oh, she's not a good team member. Or we can be really assertive and out there and uh, exude confidence, right, as kind of a protective measure,
Mhm.
where we're like, yeah, like, look at me, I'm a great person, I've got this, like, I'm really valuable here. And that can be seen as like, oh, she's too aggressive, she's too confident, whoa, she can't be a leader here, right, because she's going to rub people the wrong way. It's like, it's just such a catch 2020, like, no matter what, we don't we are often put in these situations where we don't feel like we can be ourselves. A lot of times we don't even know who our authentic self is. And then in the workplace, because we can't talk about our lived experience, like, we also can't find mentors that can either relate or maybe even share that same lived experience to help us navigate these situations, or to give us advice, best practices, through this lens of being an adoptee or being a foster. And so, yeah, it's really impactful. It compounds, right, this impact that adoptees and fosters face, especially when we're talking about growing our careers or changing our careers, or just like navigating, right, all of the changes that happen within these workplaces. Like, especially, I mean, this climate is a perfect example. There's layoffs happening left and right. There's the dismantling of DEIB. There's all of these things that are happening within workplaces. And I'll caveat and say, not all workplaces, but some are
Mhm.
dismantling DEIB programs. And it's also complicated because adoptees of color can often feel like, well, we're not even included in these DEIB initiatives. So, like, does that impact me? Does it not? I don't know. And like, again, this landscape currently is a great example of just some of these challenges that we navigate as professionals. And, especially we're talking about layoffs and mass layoffs. And I know that you are currently in a place where you're seeking your next opportunity. You're making a change in your life as well. And I can imagine, like, for me too, like, this has happened where it's brought up things from my experience as an adoptee and foster. It's brought up new challenges as I'm job searching that I have to navigate through. And then I don't have the tools. And then I don't have people to talk to about it. And then the whole cycle starts all over again. So talk to me a little bit about what your experience is, and like what you would, like our allies also to like know, like, how they can support us during this time.
Well, I mean, I think, like as I mentioned before, like there's so many milestones in our lives that really, I like to think of the trauma related to relinquishment and adoption and the loss and grief and all of that, they're kind of like strings that are laid across the essence of who you are. And when you enter into these situations where these strings are like being plucked and you just, it resonates and reverberates throughout the rest of your life. And so, now here I am, leaving a community that I really love working in, the adoption community. And, the reality of living in a capitalist society is that there's not a lot of resources in the adoption community. And that's hard. I think, even just that, leaving that community is like this feeling of abandoning people or letting them down is really hard. And I think, even just the process of submitting your cover letter and resume, you are, it is plucking at that string of rejection, and you are saying like, pick me, or, you know, I think I'm good enough. You have, and like, so, like just that string of like self-value and worth, is being plucked, and it, I feel it in my body every time I submit something of like, oh, is this going to be an acceptance or a rejection? And I think logically it's easy to understand, especially in this work climate, this employment climate, that there's a lot of job seekers, there's a lot of competition, that it really isn't personal. And yet I think as an adopted person, it is very difficult to not take it personally. Because it just, again, and like it is, touching, like plucking, playing a string that's just so deep seated in the core of who you are. And it's impossible not to feel that. And so, and then, maybe you do get an interview, and it's that whole rejection, acceptance, but on another level, right? Because now you're talking to people face to face, and really hoping they see your value, and then you get that rejection, and it's just, really easy to be like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm not as valuable as I thought I was. My mom didn't think I was valuable enough to keep, so maybe that's true. And it feels like this affirmation of this really hard, pre-verbal trauma, that you do tons of therapy and try to read the books and, follow the people on Instagram to try to really understand that. And yet, even, when all those chords are being played so deeply in your psyche and your soul, it's impossible not to feel them. And so I just find seeking employment is like such this very challenging cycle of rejection and acceptance, and trying to convince people, feeling like you're trying to convince people of your value, and then very often coming up with nothing, which doesn't feel great. And then how much time does it take you to bounce back from that? And I think if don't have that awareness of participating in that process, if I'm an avoider, if you're an avoider, all of a sudden you're not looking as hard, you're not sending out as many resumes, and you're not trying to network with people. And then people, other people in your life are seeing you as not ambitious or not trying as hard, when really you need the time to patch yourself up again, and like feel like you have the resilience or the stamina to protect yourself one more time as you go through this process yet again. And I think for allies, it's just really important for them to recognize and make space for an adopted person, or fosteree might not be as resilient as somebody who hasn't had that experience. Like, somebody who hasn't had that experience might be able not to take that rejection personally. And yet for myself, it takes me longer to unpack this idea of like, oh, like whatever my resume or my cover letter said, it clearly wasn't a fit for them. It's not against me personally. But I got to take a beat for that. I still have to take the time to be able to, go through that emotions process and move on to the next thing.
Yeah, well, and you talked about too, right? This is an interesting topic, especially now because of just how the influx of job seekers in our country right now. Like there's just the job market right now is really, really tough. I mean, really tough. But especially now, even really connected, accomplished people, right, are struggling in this job market if they're looking. And so that rejection piece and the piece of having to prove yourself or never feeling enough is like amplified, like majorly amplified if you're a job seeker in this moment in time. And it's always, people are always referencing it as like, oh, this is a numbers game. You just like put in tons of applications and you just put yourself out there a bunch of times and keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it, to your point, the resilience piece. But if you're an adoptee, that especially if you've had multiple relinquishments or you didn't necessarily experience a great adoption placement, but even if you did, you still carry that trauma of the initial separation and an initial relinquishment. And then for fosters too, especially those that have spent the majority of their childhoods in institutions or in care homes where they're given up multiple times, then having to prove themselves multiple times, and then being told, nope, you're not good enough multiple times. Like that, the ability to constantly apply for jobs, interview for jobs, and be rejected from jobs is a heavy, heavy, heavy experience. It is very unpleasant for the normal person, but it's definitely amplified as someone with our unique lived experience. And so I'm really appreciative, right, that you bring that up for our community, that we're discussing this on behalf of our communities right now, because it really is I think what you said, right, it's like the unseen struggles and challenges that are layered in addition to just being a job seeker. Being a job seeker in itself is hard enough. So talk to us a little bit about what you've seen from working in the space for so long, or what you yourself might have deployed for your own well-being, like as a practice for care for yourself. I don't like when society pushes like the narrative on us, like, oh, you're so resilient. You're amazing because you're so resilient. Like, no, it's a forced resilience. That's actually not amazing. It doesn't feel amazing because we're just literally forced to do it if we want to make it through the day or make it through whatever. And so that whole there's a lot of care, self-care, and advice, right, to get through like this period of time from other people, right? Professionals or non-professionals in the mental health space of like, just keep going, just push through, so it'll happen for you, that kind of thing. Then that's just like not super helpful all the time, especially when just like that, the putting yourself through the rejection piece every single day is like literally the hardest part of the whole experience. Like sometimes the being unemployed, not getting a paycheck, like that's not as hard as I'm literally getting rejection emails multiple times a day or every day. And so what have you deployed, or what do you think is helpful for adoptees and fosters who are job seeking right now?
Things that I have found helpful personally is being in therapy. So having a therapeutic support person who can help me kind of process and recognize the emotions that I'm feeling. I think avoidance is just one of my survival tactics. I'm really good at it. And so, like, engaging with somebody to be consciously talking about how I'm feeling is a really good practice for me. I think too, having an adopted person community is really important, because those are the
Okay.
people who are going to, you're going to be like, another rejection letter. And people are going to understand you on a level that, maybe even your partner or spouse might not understand, because they are not adopted people. And just having that space to be understood and validated in a way that with people that share a lived experience is really important. And I think a lot of self-compassion, because the rejection piece is really difficult. But I think for me, that what the rejection really gets at is the sense of self-worth and value.
Mm-hmm.
And as an adopted person, I'm 46 years old, and I think that is this idea of worth and value is one of my number one challenge of how do I believe that I am worthy when my life started out in this experience that told me I was not worthy, I was not
Mm-hmm.
valuable. That is really hard. I think, and going back to, I think community and therapeutic support really helps build your awareness so you can understand those really, deeply rooted strings that are being plucked through this whole process. And I think it is a good opportunity to practice self-love and compassion for yourself. When you're feeling bad, or if you were really hoping, you had a series of great interviews and then they decided to go with someone else, really building this ability not to be outwardly resilient to those around you, but to really hold yourself and be like, that was really hard and really sucked. And it makes me think about, how my own mother rejected me as an infant. And now I'm like
Yeah.
going through this process of how do you, you recognize that. And so you can kind of put yourself back together and get yourself to the point where you can try again. And I think it's also important not to compare ourselves to our non-adopted counterparts.
Yeah.
Certainly everyone has their own struggles and traumas they've experienced that influences their own experience of, trying to become employed. And I think, as we've been talking about this whole time, there are these layers and complexities for adopted and fostered people that really can't be compared to people who have birth privilege. And so I think it's just really important to love yourself and make sure you're finding people who can help you love yourself and also love you.
Yeah. No, that's really amazing insight. I can hear a lot of years of experience behind those words, and like that, what you're sharing is really rooted, right, in community, in support, and you obviously inherently understand these challenges and like what's helped you, what's not helped you. And now that you're taking the time to share that with our audience, with our supporters, with our community, it means a lot. Like, because this is a vulnerable place to be in terms of a life stage. And then in addition, like you're finding space to be able to help others through your story and through sharing, right? What has worked for you, the tools that you have seen help other adoptees and other fosters, and what our allies can also do to be a real support system and not just a name only or like a afterthought, right? And
Mhm.
so I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing all of this. And we're gonna move into rapid fire questions in just a minute.
Okay.
And well, everything that we've talked about today, like what do you feel like would have helped like the younger version of you in this phase?
Well, before I answer that, I want to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share and creating this platform to support people in this area of their life. I think, again, there's just so many layers and complexities from our experience that make this, employment and career and workplace just more challenging to navigate. And so I really appreciate you and the work that you are doing.
Thank you.
I think for my younger self, I really wish that was on the journey of awareness and identity sooner, that I wasn't so caught up in, trying to fit into whiteness and my family, and that, I could have developed this awareness sooner, because I think that is really the challenge. I mean, as a young person, you are trying to figure out who you are. And if you are given the opportunity and the tools, access to therapy, access to community, some of those things we're not always ready for. And I think we can be prepared to receive them as younger people, so we can pursue them or access them when we are ready. My kids are 12 and 9, and both my husband and I, we always talk very openly about being in therapy, going to therapy, having conversations with our therapist, or my adoptee friends, and going to conferences and groups and events, because it's just really important. I think that modeling of what does it mean to build your own resources and access those when you really are needing them. And I think for my younger self, it was just that, like, that permission, the modeling for how to access support and resources, and the community. Just really, I wish I would have had been in a emotional and mental space to embrace the adopted person community sooner in my life.
Yeah. Yep. I would resonate. Like, that resonates with me too. So, for people that are listening, especially if you're a younger adoptee or younger foster, reach out to people like Shelise, like me, to our community. And, if you're struggling with these things, obviously, if you're a job seeker, but also if you have this lived experience and you're trying to figure out, like, who am I? What do I identify as? What is my story? What is my narrative? Like, what do I have permission to do, to be? Well, let me tell you, like, your story is your own. Like, you own it. Like, tell it the way that you want to share it, right? And, like, you live your life. You're not living your life for others. You live your life, and you shape how you want it to be. And so I'll just say that right here. But yeah, Shalise is absolutely right. The community is going to be so key to the being able to navigate your journey and not feel alone, and to get some sound advice and insight on what to do, like how to navigate these certain challenges. So thank you so much, Shalise, for sharing that. And we're going to transition to our rapid fire. And before we do that and end the show, just want to make a plug for you. What roles are you looking for, and where can people connect with you?
All right. What roles am I looking for? I think I'm still in this process. I think I'm still figuring that out. What I want to do is, I think in my core, I am a person who likes to help people and connect people. And that's really what I want to be doing, is feeling like I am assisting a greater cause and creating connections for people that are meaningful and helpful, and really can impact their lives. And I think, and to get connected with me, I have an Instagram. It's at SKMG Adoptee, and it's a I just made it, but it's just going to be more adoption focused, and just talking about promoting other people in the community, and also just maybe adding my 2 cents about things here and there. One thing that I do really love to do is talk about adoption. So I'm always available to do that. Hit me up anytime. And yeah, and just I have to, of course, acknowledge and give a shout out to my former employer, Adoption Mosaic. If you are looking for community, if you are looking for education, if you're looking for your parents, adoptive parents, to be educated, it's a great place to start, and provides a lot of opportunities for community and connection and education. I do have to also plug Transracial Parenting, which is an adoptive parent course provided by Adoption Mosaic. I am a co-facilitator for that course, and I am happy to be the person that takes on part of the burden of helping adoptive parents understand their transracially adopted person.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you're taking on other workshop and speaking opportunities too.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Awesome. Yes. So if you, Shelise resonates with you, you are looking for someone with this intersection of identities and experiences with her background, look her up or contact us at the Inclusion Initiative, and we'll be happy to connect you. And we second the plug for Adoption Mosaic. They're wonderful and amazing. We've had Ostrid on the show before as well. So without further ado, let's get into rapid fire. Ready?
Okay. Yes.
All right. Short and sweet. First thing that comes to your head, okay? Favorite food?
Cheese.
Oh, is that the Minnesotan coming out in you?
I think so. I don't know. My
Midwesterners
parents
love
were dairy farmers till I was 9. So I think, I have a foundation of dairy products in my life.
Yes. All right. And what's your superpower as an adoptee?
Connecting people. Just like gathering all the resources, and when I meet somebody and hearing like, oh, I'm interested in this, being able to say, oh, have you seen this, this, and this, or heard of this organization? I think that is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. That makes a lot of sense. What did you dream of doing when you were a kid?
I wanted to be a ballerina.
Oh, I can picture that for you. Oh. And what is one thing on your bucket list?
Take my kids to Korea.
Oh, yeah, that's one of mine too. Love it. And then finally, what is a piece of advice that has really helped you in your life?
That I am good enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode with Shelise, and all of the links and the things that she's available for will drop in the show notes. So until next time, take care, everybody. Thanks so much for all your support. See you later. Bye.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe, share, and follow us. Check out our show notes to know where to find us on social, and our website is theinclusioninitiative.com. If you're an adoptee of color or a foster care alum and you want to join our professional community, it's free, by the way. Hit me up via DM, or you can find our email in the show notes. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.